Every year on October 15th, Ibrahim Traoré would visit his father's grave in the small cemetery outside Wahiguya. The date held special significance. It was the anniversary of his father's death, a tragedy that had shaped his entire life. But this October 15th, 2024, was different. Something extraordinary was about to unfold. Waiting by the weathered graveside was an elderly man Ibrahim hadn't seen in decades, Marcel Sankara, his father Amara's old colleague from 30 years ago. The man's presence there wasn't coincidental. He had been waiting, watching, preparing for this exact moment for 3 decades. "Son," Marcel said, his voice carrying the weight of years and secrets, "your father wasn't just a mine worker. He was the man who wrote Africa's freedom plan. And now it's time for you to complete that plan." The thick folder Marcel handed over would change Ibrahim's life forever. Because inside this weathered folder was a secret that had been hidden for 30 years. Documents, maps, and evidence that Phoenix Mining Corporation, Golden Eagle Industries, and Northern Intelligence Agency had feared would surface for 3 decades. Today, I'm going to tell you about the extraordinary plan Ibrahim Traoré's father Amara had hidden for 30 years, and how this plan would ultimately change Africa's destiny and challenge the global power structure that had controlled the continent's resources for generations. Back then, 8-year-old Ibrahim Traoré would watch his father Amara draw strange maps at home every evening after returning from the gold mines. The small boy would sit quietly in the corner of their modest living room, observing as his father meticulously sketched underground tunnel networks, water flow patterns, and mineral deposit locations across multiple sheets of paper. Little Ibrahim thought these were just mine maps, technical drawings related to his father's daily work extracting gold from the earth. But he couldn't have known that Amara Traoré was actually working on Burkina Faso's most important secret project, one that would have implications far beyond their small nation's borders. The gold mines established by Phoenix Mining Corporation in Burkina Faso weren't just extracting the precious metal that brought foreign currency into the country. They were simultaneously executing a far more sinister and long-term strategy, systematically mapping and gaining control over the country's underground water resources, the most valuable asset any nation could possess in an increasingly water-scarce world. Amara Traoré was the first person to understand how this elaborate system worked, and more importantly, he was the first to realize the devastating consequences it would have for future generations of Africans. Marcel Sankara, now 73 years old, describes those dangerous days with remarkable clarity. Amara was a brilliant man, far more intelligent than Phoenix Mining ever realized. He discovered that the company wasn't just extracting gold from our soil, they were actually executing a master plan to control Burkina Faso's water resources for the next 50 years. But more importantly, Amara knew exactly how to stop them. Amara's shocking discovery was this: after Phoenix Mining Corporation completed their gold extraction operations and officially closed the mines, they intended to continue controlling the underground water channels they had accessed during their mining operations. This would make Burkina Faso forever dependent on outside sources for water, effectively maintaining economic colonialism through resource control rather than political domination. When my father realized the true scope of this operation, says now President Ibrahim Traoré, his voice filled with both pride and sorrow, he started working day and night to document everything. Strange men constantly came and went from our house: geologists, water engineers, and activists from other African countries. He would tell my mother they were business associates. But even with my child's mind, I understood these weren't normal business meetings. During this period, Amara Traoré wasn't working alone. He was secretly coordinating with similar-minded individuals across West Africa who had begun noticing strange patterns in foreign mining operations. Engineers in Mali noticed that gold mining companies were drilling far deeper than necessary for gold extraction. Geologists in Ghana observed that mining operations were mapping water tables with unusual precision. Agricultural experts in Niger documented unexplained changes in groundwater levels near mining sites. What they discovered was a coordinated effort across multiple countries and companies to gain control over Africa's most precious resource, fresh water. On the night of October 15, 1994, Amara Traoré sensed that his secret investigation had been discovered. Phoenix Mining's security personnel had been asking questions about him, and several of his contacts in other countries had reported increased surveillance. That night, he woke his son Ibrahim from sleep. "Son, I'm going to tell you something very important," Amara said, his voice unusually serious. If anything happens to me, you must find Uncle Marcel. He'll explain everything to you when you're old enough to understand and act on this information. Little Ibrahim didn't understand what these ominous words meant. The next morning, his father left for work at Phoenix Mining's gold extraction facility as usual. By afternoon, news arrived that would shatter their family forever. Amara Traoré had lost his life in what company officials described as an unfortunate industrial accident involving heavy mining equipment. Marcel Sankara remembers that tragic day with crystal clarity. Amara's death wasn't an accident. Phoenix Mining's security director James Mitchell had learned about Amara's investigation into their water extraction operations. Company executives made the decision to permanently silence him before he could expose their long-term strategy to the international community. After Amara's sudden death, his widow Fatou Traoré made the difficult decision to take her young son and move to another region of the country, hoping to escape any potential danger that might still threaten their family. Phoenix Mining Corporation believed they had successfully eliminated the threat to their operations. They couldn't have been more wrong. President Ibrahim Traoré made his annual pilgrimage to Wahiguya to visit his father's grave, a solemn tradition he had maintained for years. The cemetery was quiet, with only the sound of wind rustling through the acacia trees that provided shade for the weathered tombstones. But this time, something was different. Someone was waiting for him. Uncle Marcel? Ibrahim asked with surprise, immediately recognizing the elderly man despite the passage of 3 decades. Marcel Sankara had returned after 30 years of careful preparation and patient waiting. In his weathered hands, he carried a thick folder that contained documents which could reshape the political and economic landscape of an entire continent. Ibrahim, my son, the time has finally come, Marcel said solemnly. Your father has been waiting for this moment, and you now have the power and position necessary to complete his mission. The two men sat together on a simple concrete bench positioned next to Amara's grave. Marcel carefully opened the folder, and Ibrahim was immediately shocked by what he saw. Inside were detailed maps drawn in his father's distinctive handwriting, photocopied documents bearing Phoenix Mining's corporate letterhead, geological surveys, water table analyses, and most importantly, a comprehensive map showing secret water extraction points located across 15 different African countries. Your father, Marcel explained with deep respect in his voice, had succeeded in uncovering and documenting a massive conspiracy. But his mission wasn't just to protect Burkina Faso. It was to safeguard all of Africa's water resources. The documents revealed in shocking truth. Phoenix Mining Corporation, working in coordination with Golden Eagle Industries and Northern Intelligence Agency, were implementing an identical resource extraction strategy across 15 African countries simultaneously. Under the public guise of legitimate mining operations, they were systematically mapping and gaining control over underground water resources across the continent. How did my father manage to uncover all of this information? Ibrahim asked, amazed by the scope and detail of the documentation. Marcel smiled with obvious pride. Amara wasn't just a mine worker, Ibrahim. He was a founding member of a secret Pan-African organization called the Baobab Network. This was a clandestine network of individuals dedicated to protecting Africa's natural resources from foreign exploitation. In the winter of 1985, during a period of increased foreign investment in African natural resources, 50 carefully selected individuals from 12 different African countries had gathered in secret to form an unprecedented network of resistance. The meeting took place in a remote location in Ghana, far from the watchful eyes of foreign intelligence services and corporate security teams. Among the founding members were mine workers like Amara, university professors specializing in geology and hydrology, medical doctors who understood the health implications of water scarcity, teachers who could educate future generations about resource protection, and even a few government employees who had access to official documents and policy discussions. Their shared goal was ambitious and dangerous: to prevent Western corporations from systematically exploiting and controlling Africa's natural resources through legal but unethical means. Amara Traoré had been selected as the Baobab Network's primary representative in Burkina Faso. For 9 crucial years, from 1985 to 1994, he had been methodically tracking Phoenix Mining's operations, documenting their activities, and coordinating with network members across the continent to build a comprehensive picture of corporate resource extraction strategies. Phoenix Mining's strategy was far more sophisticated than simple gold extraction, Marcel explained, his voice growing more serious. As they dug their mining shafts and tunnels, they were simultaneously gaining access to underground water channels and aquifers. Their long-term plan was economically brilliant and morally devastating. They would officially close the gold mining operations after 20 years, but continue controlling the water resources they had accessed during the mining phase. This strategy would effectively make 15 African countries completely dependent on foreign corporations for access to their own water resources. With climate change accelerating North Africa's desertification and reducing surface water availability, groundwater would inevitably become Africa's most strategically important and economically valuable natural resource. When your father fully understood the implications of this plan, Marcel continued, he immediately took action. He contacted every member of the Baobab network across Africa and began coordinating the development of a comprehensive counter-strategy. As Ibrahim Traoré carefully examined the maps, documents, and strategic plans contained within the folder, he began to understand the true scope and brilliance of his father's work. Amara Traoré hadn't simply discovered Phoenix Mining's resource extraction conspiracy. He had also developed a detailed, multi-phase strategy to completely reverse their control over Africa's water resources. The first phase involved systematically identifying and documenting every location where Phoenix Mining and associated companies had gained access to underground water resources across the 15 target countries. This required coordinate work with local geologists, environmental scientists, and community leaders who could provide detailed information about changes in local water availability and quality. The second phase focused on establishing secure communication channels and operational coordination with local engineers, hydrologists, and environmental activists in all 15 affected African countries. Each country would develop a specialized team capable of protecting and reclaiming control over their nation's water resources. The final phase involved implementing legal, technical, and political measures to transfer control of underground water channels from foreign corporations back to legitimate national governments before those corporations could complete their long-term extraction and control strategies. How was my father planning to implement such an ambitious and complex strategy? Ibrahim asked, impressed by the sophistication of the planning documents. Marcel carefully pulled out a second folder from his bag. This folder contained something even more remarkable, a comprehensive list of 200 committed members of the Baobab network, with detailed contact information, professional qualifications, and specific operational responsibilities across 15 African countries. In each country, specialized teams had been established with the expertise necessary to protect and reclaim control over their nation's water resources. After your father's tragic death, Marcel explained with visible sadness, the active implementation of the plan was temporarily halted for security reasons, but the network members never abandoned the mission. For 30 years, we continued working in secret, carefully monitoring Phoenix Mining's activities and waiting for the right opportunity to act. When Ibrahim opened the third folder, he was stunned by its contents. Inside was a meticulously detailed report documenting Phoenix Mining Corporation's operational activities over the previous 3 decades. The evidence clearly showed that the company had indeed gained control over water resources in 15 different African countries, exactly as Amara had predicted 30 years earlier. But the most shocking revelation was contained in this final folder, Marcel said gravely, indicating the last collection of documents. Phoenix Mining and their corporate partners are no longer satisfied with simply controlling African water resources. They have developed plans to extract and sell this water directly to European markets. The final folder contained detailed plans for a massive project designated Project Sahara Water. This ambitious undertaking, jointly developed by Phoenix Mining Corporation, Golden Eagle Industries, and Northern Intelligence Agency, outlined a comprehensive strategy to construct enormous pipeline systems that would transport Africa's precious groundwater across the Mediterranean Sea to supply European cities and agricultural operations. If this project succeeds, Marcel warned, Africa will experience complete desertification within 50 years. Virtually all of the continent's groundwater reserves will be redirected to support European economic development and population growth. As President Ibrahim Traoré carefully studied the evidence his father had risked his life to gather, he fully understood how remarkably prescient and forward-thinking Amara had been. 3 decades earlier, his father had accurately predicted the exact situation Africa now faced in 2024. Uncle Marcel, Ibrahim said with determination, How can we successfully implement my father's strategy now that I have the political power and resources necessary to act on a continental scale? Marcel smiled with satisfaction and pride. It's no coincidence that you have risen to become president, Ibrahim. The Baobab Network has been carefully monitoring African political developments for 30 years, waiting for this exact moment. You are the first person with sufficient political authority, international credibility, and moral commitment to successfully implement your father's visionary plan. Exactly 1 week after his life-changing conversation with Marcel Sankara at his father's gravesite, President Ibrahim Traoré exercised his diplomatic influence to call an emergency special session at the African Union headquarters. However, this wasn't a general assembly. He specifically invited only the presidents and prime ministers of the 15 countries where Phoenix Mining Corporation and associated companies had established water extraction operations. The invitation was unprecedented in its directness. I have obtained evidence of systematic foreign exploitation of our continental water resources. This evidence requires immediate action and complete continental coordination. At the classified meeting, Ibrahim presented the comprehensive documentation his father had assembled 30 years earlier, supplemented by 3 decades of additional evidence gathered by Baobab Network members. The assembled leaders were stunned into silence as they learned the true scope of foreign resource exploitation occurring within their own borders. President Dr. Keita of Mali, Ibrahim addressed his colleague directly. You believe that Golden Eagle Industries was conducting legitimate gold extraction operations in your country. However, these documents prove they have actually gained control over the underground extensions of the Senegal River system, which provides water for over 60% of your population. President Prof. Asante of Ghana, he continued methodically, the Volta River's underground distribution network, which supplies water for your major cities, is now under the operational control of Phoenix Mining through their closed mining infrastructure. As each national leader learned about the systematic resource exploitation occurring within their own sovereign territory, their initial shock transformed into anger, then determination to reclaim control over their nation's most vital resources. But Ibrahim had prepared more than just evidence. He had developed practical solutions. Ibrahim announced his intention to revive and dramatically expand the Baobab network his father had helped establish 3 decades earlier. However, this new version would be far more sophisticated, better funded, and technologically advanced than the original underground organization. The new continental network would establish professional water protection teams in each of the 15 affected countries. Each national team would include a minimum of 10 qualified geologists, 8 water engineers, 5 environmental lawyers, and 3 cybersecurity specialists. These teams would be equipped with modern technology, legal authority, and financial resources necessary to identify, document, and reclaim control over water resources currently under foreign corporate control. We will complete the work my father started 30 years ago, Ibrahim declared to the assembled leaders. Africa's water will belong to Africa's people, not foreign corporations seeking to profit from our most essential natural resource. Ibrahim's legal team, working in coordination with the continent's most experienced international law experts, prepared comprehensive litigation against Phoenix Mining Corporation and associated companies. The cases would be filed simultaneously in the African Court of Human Rights, the International Court of Justice, and the legal systems of each affected country. The legal foundation for these cases was the extensive documentation Amara Traoré had collected 30 years earlier, combined with 3 decades of additional evidence gathered by Baobab Network members. This evidence clearly demonstrated that Phoenix Mining and associated companies had systematically violated the fundamental human rights of African populations by gaining unauthorized control over essential water resources. Access to clean water is a fundamental human right recognized by international law, Ibrahim argued in the initial court filings. No private corporation has the legal or moral authority to gain control over an entire continent's water resources and then exploit those resources for private profit while local populations face water scarcity. The Baobab Network's new generation of young engineers and cybersecurity specialists had spent months developing sophisticated technological approaches to disable Phoenix Mining's water control systems. These operations were completely legal because the water resources in question legitimately belonged to the African countries where they were located. In Ghana, Dr. Kwame Asante led a team of computer engineers from Ghana University of Technology in a complex operation to reprogram Phoenix Mining's automated water pump systems. After 72 hours of careful work, they successfully transferred operational control from the corporate systems to Ghana's Ministry of Water Resources. In Mali, water engineer Aminata Keita coordinated a similar technological operation targeting the underground water extraction infrastructure that had been installed along the Senegal River system. Her team's work ensured that these vital water resources would now serve Mali's agricultural and urban development needs rather than corporate profit margins. Similar technological reclamation operations were simultaneously implemented across all 15 affected countries. Within 6 months, every participating African nation had successfully regained full operational control over their underground water resources. When Phoenix Mining Corporation CEO Victoria Sterling realized that their carefully constructed 30-year strategy was collapsing simultaneously across multiple countries, she immediately called an emergency meeting of corporate executives and their government liaisons. "Our entire African operation has been systematically dismantled overnight," Sterling reported to the panicked board of directors. "This Ibrahim Traoré somehow obtained detailed knowledge of our operational strategies, legal vulnerabilities, and technological infrastructure. How is this possible?" Golden Eagle Industries CEO Robert Chen, who had personally overseen much of the West African operation, was equally stunned. Amara Traoré's son has proven to be just as intelligent and resourceful as his father was. But now it's too late for any effective countermeasures. The African countries have achieved unprecedented unity and coordination. Northern Intelligence Agency Operations Director Sarah Mitchell, who was actually the daughter of James Mitchell, the security director who had ordered Amara Traoré's assassination 30 years earlier, was forced to admit that the plan her father had tried to prevent through murder had ultimately succeeded despite their efforts. The African Union achieved the most significant display of continental unity in its institutional history. All 15 affected countries simultaneously signed the African Water Sovereignty Pact, a comprehensive agreement that legally guaranteed Africa's water resources could only be developed and utilized by African institutions for the benefit of African populations. The European Union expressed official disappointment with the cancellation of Project Sahara Water, which had been intended to provide supplementary water supplies for European agricultural and urban development. However, European governments could not take any effective legal action because the water resources clearly belonged to African countries under established international law. China and Russia issued official statements supporting Africa's assertion of sovereignty over its natural resources. The United States government maintained diplomatic silence while privately reassessing its own resource extraction strategies across multiple continents. Exactly 1 year after his encounter with Marcel Sankara, President Ibrahim Traoré returned to his father's grave for another annual visit. This time, Marcel accompanied him, along with representatives from all 15 countries that had participated in the water reclamation operations. "What would my father think if he could see what we've accomplished?" Ibrahim asked as they stood together beside the simple gravestone. Marcel smiled with deep satisfaction. "He always knew you would succeed, Ibrahim. Even as a child, you displayed the same determination and intelligence that made him such an effective activist." Amara frequently told me, "When Ibrahim grows up, he will complete the work we started and transform Africa's relationship with the rest of the world." Ibrahim looked at the modest gravestone, which bore only the simple inscription, Amara Traoré 1965 to 1994. But now he fully understood his father's true historical significance. Amara had been far more than a mine worker. He was a visionary activist who had sacrificed his life to protect Africa's future. Today, the modernized Baobab Network has become one of Africa's most influential and effective civil society organizations. The network now includes over 10,000 active members working across all 54 African countries. Their expanded mission encompasses protection of all natural resources, not just water systems. President Ibrahim Traoré serves as the network's honorary international chairman, but the real operational leadership consists of young African professionals, engineers, scientists, lawyers, and environmental specialists who are committed to ensuring that Africa's natural wealth serves African development priorities. "The seed my father planted 30 years ago has grown into a mighty baobab tree," Ibrahim reflects. "Under the protection of this tree, all of Africa's resources and all of Africa's people can flourish according to our own priorities and values." 30 years ago, Amara Traoré, a humble mine worker in a small West African country, made the ultimate sacrifice to protect his continent's most vital natural resource. His son, Ibrahim Traoré, honored that sacrifice by completing his father's visionary plan and securing Africa's water sovereignty for future generations. This remarkable story teaches us that sometimes the most profound historical changes are initiated by individuals who appear ordinary but possess extraordinary vision, courage, and determination. Amara Traoré worked in a gold mine, but his true legacy was providing the blueprint for continental liberation from resource exploitation. President Ibrahim Traoré has proven himself worthy of his father's legacy and sacrifice. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has achieved complete water independence. More importantly, this independence has inspired and enabled similar achievements across the entire African continent. In today's world, Phoenix Mining Corporation's African operations have been completely terminated. Golden Eagle Industries and Northern Intelligence Agency have similarly been forced to abandon their resource extraction strategies across the continent. Africa's water resources now belong to African peoples and serve African development priorities. This represents not just Burkina Faso's victory, but a triumph for the entire continent and a new model for how developing countries can reclaim control over their natural heritage. President Ibrahim Traoré maintains his tradition of visiting his father's grave every year on October 15th, but he no longer makes this journey alone. Each year, members of the Baobab Network, government officials from multiple countries, and ordinary citizens who have benefited from water sovereignty join him in remembering Amara Traoré's sacrifice. The documents that emerged after 30 years of careful preservation weren't simply family papers or personal mementos. They represented a comprehensive blueprint for continental liberation and a new model for resource sovereignty that is now being studied and adapted by developing countries around the world. By completing his father's visionary plan, Ibrahim Traoré has brought Africa significantly closer to achieving true economic independence and self-determination. The struggle for complete resource sovereignty continues, but the success of the water reclamation project has provided both inspiration and practical methodology for future efforts. As this story demonstrates, whoever controls essential natural resources ultimately controls political and economic destiny. For too many decades, Africa's most valuable resources served foreign interests while African populations experienced poverty and dependency. But Africa's future is now genuinely in African hands. The continent possesses not only abundant natural wealth, but also the human intelligence, technological capability, and political unity necessary to manage that wealth for African benefit. My father gave me far more than a name, President Ibrahim Traoré reflects. He gave me a sacred mission and a comprehensive strategy for achieving that mission. Today we have successfully completed the Water Sovereignty Project, but this represents only the beginning of our work. The struggle will continue until every one of Africa's natural resources serves African development and African prosperity. The documents that emerged after 30 years of careful concealment weren't just family secrets or historical curiosities. They constituted Africa's declaration of resource independence and provided a practical roadmap for achieving economic liberation. This story proves that with sufficient vision, determination, and strategic planning, even the most powerful global corporations and intelligence agencies can be successfully challenged by united African leadership committed to serving African interests. The legacy continues, the mission expands, and Africa's destiny remains firmly in African hands.